There's a kind of pain that doesn't come from being rejected, but from being deeply loved, then avoided like you were the problem. You saw them being light, open, and easy with others, but with you, it was chaos. They told you things they'd never told anyone else. They opened up about childhood wounds, fears of abandonment, things that mattered, and then suddenly, they pulled away. Cold, silent, no explanation. You asked yourself, why are they kinder to others? Was I too much? Did I do something wrong? No, often it's the opposite. You're the one they cannot stay neutral with because you touch their core wounds. Avoidants can easily maintain low-stakes relationships when there's no real emotional risk. But when you're the real choice, their nervous system gets activated. Not because they don't love you, but because they're terrified of what deep love brings. Exposure, failure, losing control. What they felt for you was more real than with anyone else. But real love, in the mind of someone who hasn't healed, is also the place where they feel small, unworthy, never enough. So they pull back not because you don't matter, but because you matter too much. Loving an avoidant and becoming their real choice is nothing like entering a normal relationship. It's when you step directly into a zone where love isn't just an emotion, it's a nervous system trigger. Avoidants are often misunderstood as cold and distant, but in reality, when you truly matter to them, their nervous system responds as if you are a threat. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because deep love awakens all the parts of them that haven't yet healed. The sense of not being enough, the fear of being controlled, the fear of being truly seen, with flaws and vulnerabilities exposed. At first, it may feel like a special connection. They show you a side they don't show anyone else. They talk about their childhood, their fears, their scars, things they've never admitted. You might think, this person really trusts me, and you're right, but it's precisely because they trust you, because you touch the deepest layers within them, that panic begins. They start pulling away, one moment warm, the next distant, intense, then silent. The push-pull behavior is not a game. It's their internal dysregulation when their nervous system cannot tolerate intimacy without feeling threatened. Your silence, something seemingly small, can make them spiral. A gentle boundary from you might be interpreted by their brain as rejection. A disappointed look can trigger the belief that they've failed again, and instead of facing it, they withdraw. They leave before they're left to protect their fragile sense of self. It's not cruelty, it's a nervous system reacting to old memories where closeness once led to pain. The cruel irony is that you feel abandoned when you were actually the one they loved the deepest. But deep love has never guaranteed that someone is healthy enough to stay. In fact, it's often because the love runs so deep that they feel too small to be worthy of it. They cannot stay calm with you because you're not just an option they can forget. You're a mirror reflecting the parts of them they've avoided all their lives, and they're afraid, not of you, but of the truth of who they are when they're with you. Here lies the cruel irony. The person an avoidant loves the deepest is often the one who triggers the most anxiety, fear, and inner chaos. Meanwhile, the person they seem calm, stable, and easy with is often just an option. A light connection, low risk, emotionally safe. When you see them texting someone regularly, keeping the conversation playful and smooth, seemingly stable and content, don't rush to assume it's real love. In the inner world of an avoidant, stability doesn't mean depth. On the contrary, it's often a sign of an emotional safe zone where they can show up without needing to change or be vulnerable. With an option, their nervous system stays calm. They don't have to expose their wounds. They don't have to break through their defensive walls. They don't have to face the inner belief that they're not enough. Everything feels light, because nothing is truly at stake. And because there's no emotional risk, they're more relaxed, easier to smile, easier to flirt, easier to be consistent in texting, easier to please. They can appear like the perfect version of themselves, but only within the bounds of a shallow bond. There's no pressure to repair when conflict happens, because deep down, they know this relationship is not where they plan to stay. It doesn't center them in any real way. They can pull away any time without much guilt, because they never gave much of themselves to begin with. With an option, they avoid deep conversations. They don't share their core wounds, simply because they don't have to. They may seem gentle, thoughtful, but there's always a subtle emotional distance. And if conflict arises, the typical response is to disappear, ghost, or end things smoothly, as if it was never that serious. Options are where they go to escape their emotions, not where they dare to love with growth and presence. So don't let the peace in a shallow connection make you question your worth, because the emotional chaos you experienced in loving them was the very sign that you reached a part of them they've never dared to face before. This is perhaps the deepest blow to the self-worth of someone who was once the real choice. They witness the avoidant, who once seemed chaotic, overwhelmed, and dysregulated with them, suddenly become soft, kind, consistent with someone else. They see regular texting, calm responses, no stonewalling, no emotional shutdowns. And slowly, the painful thought creeps in. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was the problem. If only I had been more stable, easier to love, maybe they would have stayed. It know every hence. There's nothing more cruel than being the one who touched someone's most vulnerable places, and then being led to believe that you were the issue. But here's what this video emphasizes. The emotional intensity they once showed you wasn't because you were wrong. It's because you triggered the very parts of them they were most terrified to face. That's why their defense mechanisms were activated. You weren't too much, you were too real. With an option, they can remain calm, not because the other person is better, but because that connection doesn't challenge their emotional identity. It doesn't make them feel inadequate. It doesn't push them toward growth. But you reflected back to them everything they hadn't healed. You were the mirror, showing them their unfinished story, their wounds, their fears, their longing to be loved, and their fear of being seen. So when you see them at peace with someone else, it's easy to assume they've changed. But in truth, many avoidants are only more charming with people they don't have to be real with. They don't get triggered because nothing real is at stake. You're hurting, not because you weren't enough, but because you meant too much to someone who wasn't ready to hold that weight. Some people leave quietly, firmly, and never look back. But others return in strange, looping patterns, maybe weeks later, maybe months, or even years. They don't come back with an apology, nor do they return with any clear plan. They just show up. A vague message, a casual, "How have you been?" A small interaction that somehow reopens an old wound. It's not random. It's a sign that you were once their real choice, someone they can't easily forget. Despite their distant exterior, avoidants often carry a surprisingly deep emotional memory. They just don't know how to express it. They may not text every day, but they remember the smallest details. Your eyes, the way you went silent when hurt, the way your hand touched your chest when anxious. These memories return, not because you were a habit, but because you were real. When they go quiet, it's not that they've forgotten. They think of you often, they just don't know how to sit with those feelings. There's an uncomfortable truth. Avoidants often carry deep guilt for the person they truly loved. They compare others to you, but never say it out loud. They feel the gap you left, but lack the courage to return in a mature way. They might miss you to the point of losing sleep, But when they come back, they're still clumsy, still not ready, still unequipped to love well, still themselves but not yet whole enough to keep you. And this is where many confuse being loved with being chosen. Just because you are the one they feel guilt over, the one they can't forget, doesn't mean they are ready to love you right. Emotional memory is one thing, capacity to love is another. Immature love often wears the mask of guilt and longing. In many cases, an avoidant comes back not to repair, but to soothe their own ache, then leave again when intimacy feels threatening. You must remember, their return is a sign that you mattered, but it should never be a reason to abandon your boundaries. You don't need to stay just because they can't forget you. Your absence may shake them deeply, but that doesn't make them capable of loving you in a secure way. Sometimes, your departure is the only thing that forces them to realize your worth. But if they're not ready to take responsibility, to face their fears, to stop running, then their guilt is just a delay tactic, not a sign of transformation. What matters is your clarity. Don't confuse missing you with changing for you. Someone can miss you terribly and still have no intention of becoming better for the relationship. And if you keep staying just because you matter to them, you'll remain stuck in a loop of hope, disappointment, and starting over, same person, same pain, just a different time. After all the emotional loops, after all the push-pull, disappearing then returning cycles, you'll come to a realization. Being their real choice does not guarantee you are in a safe relationship. You might be the one they love the most, yet also the one who gets hurt the deepest. Love, in the world of an unhealed avoidant, does not follow conventional logic. It doesn't operate on stable presence, but on survival mode. They love you, but they also fear you. They crave intimacy, yet retreat the moment it gets too real. And between love and fear, the person who gets hurt the most is always the one who dares to show up fully. This is where you need to change your question. It's no longer, am I their real choice? Because the answer, whether yes or no, won't protect you from pain. The better question is their behavior evolving over time? Are they moving from avoidance to presence? From silence to dialogue? From fear to taking emotional responsibility? If the answer is no, then it doesn't matter how deeply they love you. You're still loving someone who isn't yet ready to love in a healthy way. Many people get stuck in hope simply because they once saw something real in the other's eyes. A moment of deep connection makes them forget months of emotional hurt. But connection doesn't sustain a relationship. It requires consistency, growth, and the capacity to own your emotions. You deserve a love that doesn't just come from emotional intensity, but from a person who can keep you safe, both in their actions and in their emotional stability. Loving an unhealed avoidant can be a profound life lesson, but you don't have to stay to repeat the same lesson over and over again. Your presence is a gift, not a test. And if the other person cannot receive that gift with maturity, then your decision to walk away is the highest form of self-love. One of the most important truths emphasized in the video is this: an avoidant can be pleasant with many people. They can laugh, be light, seem stable and fine on the surface. But only with their real choice do they truly lose their inner balance. Only with that person does their nervous system fail to simply shut down after conflict. They lose sleep. They carry a heavy, unspoken weight. They try to distract themselves, yet can't escape a vague sense of unease. And eventually, they return not because they're ready, but because they cannot fully let go. However, their return is not the deciding factor. This is where many people get stuck. They believe, if they miss me, if they come back, if they can't forget me, then I must matter. But emotional importance is not the same as the capacity to love in a healthy way. What truly matters lies in how they repair after conflict. An unhealed avoidant often returns with a desire to reset, to regain familiarity, soothe the emptiness, re-establish connection without touching the root of the problem. They want closeness, but not responsibility. They want comfort, but not confrontation. They may say emotionally charged words, yet avoid the essential questions. Why did I withdraw? How did I hurt you? What do I need to change to make this relationship safer? In contrast, a rare sign of growth is when they return not just because they miss you, but with conscious presence. It doesn't have to be smooth or perfect. It can be awkward, slow, uncertain, but there is one crucial difference. They don't avoid accountability. They can stay in difficult conversations. They can name their fears instead of disappearing. They don't just want to reconnect, they want to understand. This is where your boundaries become essential. Not boundaries to punish them, but boundaries to protect reality. You don't assess them by how they feel when they lose you, but by how they behave when they return. Do they change how they communicate? Do they initiate repair? Or do they simply want you back so the pain eases only to repeat the same cycle? After conflict, love is not measured by words, but by the capacity to stay present. And right here, you'll find your clearest answer. Is this person evolving, or are they just returning out of fear of losing you without being ready to change themselves? The most important thing you need to take with you after all of this is simple yet powerful. You did not imagine your worth. What you felt in that relationship, the depth of connection, the intensity, the mutual impact was real. The chaos you experienced is not proof that you were too much, unimportant, or hard to love. On the contrary, it shows that you touched the most authentic parts of someone who wasn't yet safe enough to stay with themselves. Loving an unhealed avoidant often makes you doubt your own intuition. You see that they miss you, you sense their guilt, you know your absence weighs on them, and then you get stuck asking, if I meant so much to them, why couldn't they love me properly? The answer lies in a painful but necessary truth. The ability to miss someone and the ability to love someone well are two entirely different capacities. A person can carry you in their mind for a long time, yet still lack the emotional capacity to show up, take responsibility, and protect the relationship. This is where clarity matters. Their emotions, when they lose you, are data. They show that you mattered, but their behavior when they return is the answer. It reveals whether they are capable of loving you in a healthy way. If they come back with longing but without change, without accountability, without repair, then no matter how important you were, the relationship remains unsafe for you. True healing begins when you stop needing to prove that you were someone's real choice. You don't need to be missed to be valuable. You simply need to choose relationships where love doesn't require endurance, silence, or waiting for someone to heal at your expense. You deserve a love where presence is not something you have to earn, but something that is given freely, consistently, and safely.